Jason Whitmore grabbed the quiet man by the collar in front of 30 students and sneered, "You don't belong here." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The quiet man didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't say a single word. He just looked at Jason the way a mountain looks at wind. What Jason didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that the tired, worn-out single dad standing in front of him had once operated in darkness in enemy territory, in conditions that would break most men before breakfast. But that secret that stays buried, until it doesn't. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next. The morning it all started, Marcus Reed burned the eggs. Not slightly. Not a little brown around the edges. Fully, completely, embarrassingly burned, black smoke curling up from the pan. The smoke detector screaming at 7:15 in the morning, and his 8-year-old daughter Amara standing in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas with cartoon bears on them, staring at him with those enormous brown eyes like he had personally insulted the entire concept of breakfast. "Daddy," she said slowly, "that's not food anymore. It's rustic," Marcus said. "It's black." Rustic is another word for daddy. It's black. He grabbed the pan, dropped it in the sink, and turned on the fan. Smoke poured out the back window. The neighbor's dog started barking. Outside, the early Georgia sun was already pressing itself against the neighborhood like it meant business. And Marcus Reed stood in his kitchen in a faded gray t-shirt and basketball shorts, waving a dish towel at a smoke detector, wondering, and not for the first time, how a man who had once maintained operational composure under direct enemy fire could not manage to cook eggs on a Tuesday morning. "Cereal," he offered. Amara nodded, like she'd already known that was where this was heading. He poured the cereal. She sat down. He leaned against the counter and watched her eat, this small, serious person who had his mother's eyes and her own particular way of tilting her head when she was thinking hard about something. She was thinking hard about something right now. He could always tell. "Daddy," she said without looking up from her bowl, "you need a hobby." He almost laughed. "I have hobbies. Watching baseball and fixing things around here doesn't count. I like fixing things. You fixed the same cabinet hinge 4 times last month." He opened his mouth. He closed it. She was 8 years old, and she was not wrong, which was its own particular kind of humbling. "I'm fine," he said. She looked up at him then. Those eyes, steady, careful, older than 8, in ways that made his chest hurt sometimes. She had grown up fast. Kids who grow up in houses with only one parent often do. "Ms. Donovan's son goes to that martial arts place on Birchwood," she said. "The one by the pizza place. He said it's really good." "I know the one. You should go." "Baby, I don't need—" "You used to do stuff," she said quietly. "You used to run in the mornings. You used to, I don't know, do things. Now you just work and come home and fix the same cabinet." There was no accusation in her voice. No manipulation. Just an 8-year-old telling her father something true because she loved him enough to say it out loud. Marcus looked at his daughter for a long moment. Then he looked at the burned pan in the sink. Then he looked back at her. "Finish your cereal," he said. But something had moved in him. Something small and quiet that he hadn't felt in a long time. Marcus Reed had been many things in his 34 years on this earth. He had been a son raised by a single mother in a row house in Baltimore, who worked doubles at a hospital and still found time to read to him every night until he was 11 years old and told her he was too old for that, a lie they both pretended to believe. He had been a student, not spectacular, not a prodigy, but consistent. The kind of student who figured out early that showing up mattered more than talent and proved it over and over again. He had been a United States Navy SEAL. That last part he didn't talk about. Not here in Clover Ridge, Georgia, where he'd settled 4 years ago after leaving everything else behind. Not at the community center where he worked as a maintenance technician, keeping the boilers running and the gym equipment functional and the parking lot lights replaced when they burned out. Not at Amara's school, where the other parents assumed he was a single dad who'd had a rough go of it and treated him with the particular careful kindness people offer to someone they think is fragile. How was not fragile, but he understood why they thought so. He looked tired. He was tired. Raising a child alone while carrying a weight nobody could see will do that to a man. The dark circles under his eyes were real. The way he moved slowly through the grocery store, methodically checking his list, double-checking prices, that was real too. The budget was what it was. He drove a 2009 Chevy Silverado with a cracked dashboard and an air conditioning system that worked intermittently at best. He wore the same rotation of work shirts and wore them well past the point most men would have replaced them. He cut his own hair. He cooked most of their meals from scratch because it was cheaper, which meant that on nights he wasn't burning eggs, he was actually a decent cook. Amara had opinions about his rice. Strong opinions. She had been known to give him numerical scores. The life he lived now was ordinary. Deliberately, carefully, intentionally ordinary. Because ordinary meant safe. Ordinary meant Amara had a father who came home. Ordinary meant nobody was shooting at him in the dark. He had chosen ordinary the way. Some men choose religion completely, with the full understanding that he was giving something up and accepting that the trade was worth it. Most days, he believed that. He drove past the Birchwood Academy twice before he pulled into the parking lot. The first time he just kept going. Told himself he was just scoping it out. Military habit: never walk into a space without seeing it first. The second time he sat in the parking lot for 6 minutes with the truck running, watching people go in and out. A couple of teenagers carrying gym bags. A woman in her 40s with a little boy who couldn't have been more than 5 holding a water bottle almost as big as his own torso. A man about Marcus's age, jogging from his car to the entrance like he was already late. Normal people. A normal place. He turned off the truck and went inside. The Birchwood Academy smelled like sweat and rubber mats and that particular industrial-strength cleaner that seemed to exist in every gym in America. The walls were covered with motivational posters and framed photographs of students at tournaments, medals hanging from their necks, fists raised. Trophies lined a shelf behind the reception desk, a lot of them arranged with deliberate pride. A teenage girl at the desk looked up when he walked in. "Hi, are you here for the adult beginner class?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "I think so." "First time?" "Yes." "Great Coach Whitmore is teaching tonight. He's amazing, like genuinely amazing. He's been competing nationally since he was 17. She slid a clipboard across the desk. "Just fill out the waiver and we can get you started. Class starts in 20 minutes. Marcus filled out the form. He wrote his name in the clear square print he'd developed years ago because legibility under pressure was something that got drilled into you. He listed his emergency contact, his sister Renee, who lived in Atlanta, and would be furious if she ever actually got a call from this form. He checked the box that said previous martial arts experience none, because that was the category that applied technically. What he had wasn't martial arts. What he had was something different, something functional. He handed back the clipboard and walked toward the main training floor. There were about 20 people in the beginner class, a wide range, ages from maybe 20 to somewhere in the late 50s. A mix of men and women, different shapes and fitness levels. A few of them were stretching. A few were talking to each other with the easy familiarity of people who had been coming for a few weeks. A few looked exactly like Marcus, felt uncertain, a little out of place, trying not to show it. Marcus found a spot near the back and started stretching. Quietly. Economically. He had spent enough time in situations where blending in was a survival skill that blending in felt natural now. He noticed the man before the man noticed him. Jason Whitmore walked onto the training floor, the way certain men walk into every room, like the room had been expecting him, like the space reorganized itself around his arrival. He was 26 years old, built like someone who had been doing this since before he could vote, and he moved with the precise, deliberate fluidity of a man who had practiced his movements so many times, they had stopped being technique and started being personality. How was also, Marcus noted immediately, extremely aware of how he looked, the way he carried himself, the way he scanned the room and registered who was watching, the small adjustment he made to his posture when he saw that yes, people were watching. Marcus had been around men like that. He'd been trained by some of them, worked alongside others. Some of them were the best operators he'd ever seen. Some of them you had to be careful with because ego under pressure, was a liability that got people killed. He filed the observation away and kept stretching. "All right, let's get started." Jason clapped his hands. Loud, authoritative. The room came to attention immediately, which told Marcus something about how Jason taught he'd built a room that responded to him. That was either impressive leadership or careful control. Sometimes they were the same thing. Sometimes they weren't. "New faces tonight," Jason said, scanning the room. "I see you. Welcome. This is a beginner class, which means we go back to basics regardless of what you think you know. We're building fundamentals." His gaze moved across the room, landing briefly on each new face, and then it landed on Marcus. It stayed there a beat too long. Marcus saw it happen. The small flicker of assessment. The categorization. Middle-aged. Out of shape-ish. Worn clothes. Doesn't have the look. Jason moved on without saying anything. Not yet. But Marcus had been read, and he knew it. The first part of class was basic technique. Stance, footwork, guard position. Jason walked through it with patience and precision, which Marcus respected. Whatever else was in the man, he knew his craft. He explained things clearly. He corrected students with specificity. Not just "that's wrong," but "here's exactly what's wrong, and here's exactly how to fix it." Marcus followed along. He made himself move like a beginner, careful, a little stiff, figuring things out. Not because he was afraid of what would happen if he moved naturally, but because he wasn't here to perform. He genuinely just wanted to learn the structure of this, the vocabulary of it. He'd spent years operating outside structured discipline, improvising, adapting. There was something he actually wanted from the formality of a real system. He wasn't faking incompetence. I was just not showing the whole card. There's a difference. "You." Jason's voice pointed in his direction. Marcus looked up. Jason was looking at him. "What's your name?" "Marcus." "Marcus, your back foot is too far back. You're off balance." "Okay." Marcus adjusted. Jason watched him for a moment. "Better." He moved on. But Marcus caught what happened in the pause. The slight lift at the corner of Jason's mouth. The almost smirk that said, "This one's going to be work." Joel. 20 minutes into class during a partner drill. Marcus was paired with a young guy named Devin, who looked like he was about 19, enthusiastic, and had been coming long enough to know the basics, but short enough that he still wanted to prove things. "You knew?" Devin asked as they squared up. "First class," Marcus said. "Cool, I'll take it easy on you." He said it cheerfully with genuine friendliness, which Marcus appreciated. No malice, just the confidence of youth. "That's kind of you." They ran through the drill, basic defensive blocks, controlled strikes. Marcus moved well within what the drill asked for. Devin was good, quick, energetic, a little sloppy with his backhand, but learning. From across the room, Marcus could feel Jason watching. Not curious. Evaluating. Building a story about who Marcus was. He'd seen that look before too. In different contexts, on different faces. The look that says, "I've already decided about you." The look that was usually wrong. 45 minutes into class. Jason called everyone to the center of the mat. "We're going to do a demonstration," he said. He said it casually. The kind of casual that means it was already planned. "I want new students to see the difference between what we're building toward and where you're starting from. It helps to have the contrast." He looked around the room. The kind of look that wasn't actually looking, it was already decided. "Marcus," he said. "Come up here." A few people glanced at Marcus. Some of them looked vaguely uncomfortable. Devin, standing nearby, quietly muttered, "You don't have to," which Marcus appreciated more than the kid would ever know. Marcus walked to the center of the mat. Jason looked at him, smiled. It was a polished smile, the kind that looked warm from 5 feet away, and felt like something else from 2 feet away. "Relax," Jason said. "This is just educational. I'm going to show the class a few defensive concepts. You're just helping me demonstrate." "Sure," Marcus said. "You've never done this before, right? This is your first class." "That's right." Jason nodded. He turned slightly toward the class, including them in the moment. So what we're going to see here is how someone with training handles a situation compared to someone without it. No embarrassment, this is just physics. Experience against inexperience. It's not a competition. He turned back to Marcus. And then, quiet enough that only Marcus could hear it clearly, he said, "I'll drop you in seconds." Not as a joke. Not with warmth. With a smirk. With the particular satisfaction of a man who already knew the ending. Marcus looked at him. Not with anger. Not with fear. With the flat, clear attention he had once used to read terrain. To read rooms. To read men who were about to do something they didn't fully understand the consequences of. He said very quietly, "Okay." Jason moved first. He came in with a controlled textbook strike, not full force, but real speed, real commitment. The kind of move you use when you want to demonstrate superiority without causing damage. Clean, efficient, practiced. Marcus wasn't there. Not moved, not dodged. Wasn't there the way a space is simply empty when you reach into it expecting resistance and find none. What happened next lasted less than 4 seconds. Though later, several people in the room would describe it as feeling much longer because their brains were trying to process something they hadn't expected. Marcus moved inside Jason's extension, not against it, inside it. He used Jason's own committed momentum the way water uses gravity, not fighting it, just redirecting it, and in one continuous motion that had no wasted parts, no unnecessary force, no theater. Jason Whitmore, regional champion, black belt man, who had been competing nationally since he was 17, found himself on the mat. Face up, Marcus standing over him, not with triumph, not with his hands raised, not performing anything, just standing there looking down and asking, "Are you okay?" The room was completely silent. Jason lay on the mat and stared at the ceiling. His chest was moving. He wasn't hurt. Marcus had made sure of that. The placement had been precise, the contact controlled, the landing managed. But he was on the mat, and he hadn't seen it coming. And the quiet, tired-looking single dad in the worn sneakers and faded t-shirt was standing over him with one hand extended, and an expression that was not satisfaction, was not vengeance, was not "I told you so," was just a man checking to see if another man was okay. Devin from somewhere in the back of the room said softly, "Oh." That single syllable said everything the room was feeling. Jason took Marcus's hand. He stood up. He looked at Marcus, the way you look at a road that turned into something entirely different than the map said it would. "Who are you?" Jason asked. His voice was quiet. The smirk was gone. Marcus looked at him for a moment. "Just a dad," he said, trying to learn something new. After class. Marcus drove home in the Silverado with the windows down because the air conditioning had decided tonight was not its night. The Georgia air was warm and thick and smelled like cut grass and distant rain. He thought about the look on Jason's face when he was on the mat. Not about the victory. Not about being right or winning or proving something. About the look. He'd seen that look before. The moment when a man's entire picture of the world has to shift because the facts don't match the frame. It was disorienting and necessary, and sometimes if a person had enough character, it was the beginning of something. He hoped Jason had enough character. He didn't know yet. He pulled into the driveway. The porch light was on. Renee had set it on a timer back when she'd come to stay for 2 weeks after he first moved here and decided he needed someone to mother him, a decision he had complained about and been privately grateful for. He sat in the truck for a minute, his hands on the wheel, the engine ticking as it cooled. He thought about Amara telling him he needed to do something for himself. He thought about her eating cereal and giving him that look, the old eyes look, the "I see you, Daddy" look. He thought about the last time he'd felt fully present in a room, not anxious, not managing, not performing ordinary, just present. Standing on that mat for about 4 seconds, he had been completely, entirely present. He got out of the truck. He went inside. He checked on Amara, asleep, her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm, her nightlight casting a soft orange glow across her face. He stood in her doorway for a long moment. Then he went to the kitchen and got a glass of water and stood at the window and looked out at the dark, quiet street. He thought about a lot of things. And then he thought, I'll go back. Not to prove anything to Jason Whitmore. Not to demonstrate anything to anybody. Just because for 4 seconds on a rubber mat in a gym that smelled like industrial cleaner, he had felt like himself. That was enough reason. That was more than enough. What none of them knew, not Jason, not Devin, not the teenage girl at the reception desk, not any of the 20 people who had stood in that room and watched what happened, was what had made Marcus Reed the man he was. That story was coming. All of it. But that was a story for another night. He went back on Thursday. He almost didn't. Tuesday night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling with Amara's stuffed elephant visible through the cracked door of her room, he had told himself it was a one-time thing. He'd gone. He'd done it. He'd proven to his daughter and maybe to himself that he could still walk into a room full of strangers and function like a human being. That was enough. That was more than enough. He could check that box and go back to his cabinet hinges and his baseball games and his quiet, deliberate, ordinary life. Wednesday morning, he woke up and made breakfast without burning anything. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, orange juice, and Amara ate it without comment, which meant it passed her quality threshold. And while she was eating, she looked up at him and said, "So how was it?" "Fine," he said. "Fine good or fine you hated it?" "Fine, fine." She tilted her head. "You're going back, aren't you?" It wasn't a question. He poured himself coffee and didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer, and she went back to her eggs with the small, satisfied look she got when she was right about something, which was often so. Thursday after his shift at the community center, a long one, a broken heating unit in the west corridor, and a gym treadmill that had decided to have an electrical crisis at 4 in the afternoon. He drove to Birchwood Academy, still in his work clothes, changed in the truck into the same gray t-shirt from Tuesday because he hadn't bought gym clothes yet and wasn't sure he was going to, and walked in. The teenage girl at the front desk looked up, recognized him, and her expression did something complicated, like she'd been briefed, or like word had traveled in the way that word travels in small places, which is fast and thorough and inevitable. "Hey," she said. "Marcus Wright." "Right. Coach Whitmore is already inside." A pause. He said to tell you he wants to talk before class if you come back." Marcus absorbed that. Okay. He walked toward the training floor. I was not nervous. He examined himself for nerves as he walked, genuine self-assessment, not bravado, and what he found was something closer to curiosity. He wanted to know who Jason Whitmore was when he wasn't performing. Tuesday night, he'd seen the performance. The smirk, the confidence, the deliberate choreography of a man who had built a room around his own reputation. But the man on the mat, the man staring at the ceiling with that look on his face, that recalibrating everything I thought was true. Look, that man he didn't know yet. He pushed open the door to the training floor. Jason was there. Alone, no students yet, working a heavy bag with the kind of focused mechanical repetition that meant he wasn't really working the bag. He was working something inside his own head. Marcus recognized that too. He'd spent a lot of early mornings doing exactly that. Jason heard him come in, stopped, turned. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Jason said, "You came back." "I said I was going to learn something," Marcus said. "I haven't learned it yet." Jason looked at him for a beat. Then he grabbed his water bottle from the floor, took a long drink and said, "I owe you an apology." "You don't?" "I do." He said it flatly, not emotional, not performative, just stated like a fact. "What I said to you before the demonstration, that wasn't coaching, that was something else." He paused. "I don't do that to students." "But you did it to me." The words landed simply without edge, and Jason absorbed them without defending himself, which told Marcus something meaningful about who he was underneath the performance. "I did," Jason said. "And I've been thinking about why since Tuesday night." He set down the water bottle. "I saw you walk in, and I made a decision about who you were before you said 10 words. And then I decided I think that putting you on the mat would prove something." He stopped. "It proved something, all right. It proved I got lucky," Marcus said. Jason's eyes sharpened. That wasn't luck. From where I'm standing, a lot of things look like luck when you're on the outside of them. Jason stared at him. Who are you? And I mean that for real this time. Not, I don't mean it the way I meant it Tuesday. I mean, who are you actually? Marcus looked at him for a long moment. I'm a maintenance technician, he said. I fix things at the Clover Ridge Community Center. I have a daughter named Amara, who is 8 years old, has extremely strong opinions about rice, and is probably the reason I'm standing here instead of watching baseball. He paused. That's who I am. That's not all of it. No, Marcus agreed. It's not. The silence stretched between them. Then Marcus said, Are we doing class today or not? Jason looked at him for one more second. Then something shifted in his face. Not defeat, not victory. Something more like decision. Yeah, he said. We're doing class. And he turned back toward the bag. Marcus watched him for a moment and thought there might be something worth knowing in this man. Then he found his spot on the mat and started stretching, and the other students began filtering in, and the evening began. What Marcus didn't know couldn't have known. Standing in that gym in his worn gray t-shirt was that Jason Whitmore had made 3 phone calls after class on Tuesday night. 3. His mother, who told him to stop being so competitive and listen for once. His old training partner in Atlanta, who laughed for about 45 seconds and then said, Bro, you got handled. And a man named Coach Darryl, his own mentor from when he was 15 years old, who had said something that was still sitting in Jason's chest like a stone. The ones who move like that, Coach Darryl had said, didn't learn it in a gym. Jason hadn't known what to do with that yet, but he was thinking about it. He was thinking about it a lot. The Thursday class was different from Tuesday. Not dramatically, not in ways that anyone watching from the outside would have necessarily noticed. But the temperature of the room was different. Jason taught with the same technical precision he'd shown Tuesday, the same clear corrections and specific feedback. But the edges were different. The performance quality was different. He was less concerned with being watched and more concerned with whether the student in front of him actually understood what he was explaining. Marcus noticed. He noticed because he was trained to notice, because 20 years of paying attention to the difference between what people did and what they were actually doing had made that kind of observation reflexive and automatic, as natural as breathing. Devin noticed too, though he wouldn't have put it in those terms. He sidled up to Marcus during a water break and said quietly, He's different tonight. Little bit, Marcus agreed. Because of you. Devin said it matter-of-factly, not accusatorially, just observing. Whatever you did Tuesday, I don't know what that was, by the way, and I've been training here for 4 months, but it changed something. People get recalibrated sometimes, Marcus said. That's not a bad thing. Devin looked at him sideways. What do you do like for work? Maintenance. Before that, Marcus drank his water. Why does there have to be a before that? Devin grinned. Because men who move the way you moved on Tuesday don't just happen. Something made that. Marcus looked at the younger man. 19, maybe 20, bright-eyed, genuine. The kind of young man who asked real questions because he was actually curious, not because he was trying to extract something. What made it, Marcus said carefully, is a story for a different time. But there is a story. There's always a story. He walked back onto the mat, and Devin watched him go with the particular expression of a young man filing something away for later. By the end of Thursday's class, something had established itself in the room. It was hard to name precisely. The social dynamics of a group of adults learning something physical together are subtle and fast-moving, shifting in response to 100 small signals that people pick up without knowing they've picked them up. But by the end of that second class, the other students had positioned themselves in relation to Marcus differently than they had on Tuesday. Less like he was an interloper, and more like he was something else. Something they hadn't categorized yet, but felt they should pay attention to. Marcus felt it, and was mildly uncomfortable with it. Attention had its uses. He'd operated in environments where being seen was the last thing you wanted. The habit of invisibility ran deep. But he stayed. He stayed through the end of class, through the cool down, through the brief circle where Jason did his end of class remarks. And when everyone was packing up, Jason walked over to him. "Same time Tuesday?" Jason asked. "Probably," Marcus said. "Good. A beat. You corrected your back foot. You were right about it. You also adjusted your guard position. I didn't tell you to do that." "No," Marcus agreed. Jason looked at him. Most beginners don't adjust without being told. "I'm paying attention," Marcus said simply. Jason nodded slowly, like he was confirming something to himself. "Yeah," he said. "I can see that." He walked away. Marcus picked up his bag and walked out. In the parking lot. The night was cooler now, the Georgia humidity dropping slightly as the sun had long set. He sat in the truck for a moment before starting it. His body felt good, tired in a clean way, worked, but not damaged, the satisfying physical tiredness of having done something real. He hadn't felt that in a while. Desk job tiredness and shift work tiredness were different. This was different from both. He thought about what Devin had said. Something made that. He thought about the look on Jason's face when Marcus had redirected his strike and put him on the mat in 4 seconds. The confusion, then the recalibration, then the question. He thought about Amara's face when he'd come home Tuesday, and she'd been still awake sitting on the couch, supposedly reading, but actually waiting, and she'd looked up and said, "Well," and he'd said, "I went," and she'd said, and he'd said, "And I'm going back." And she'd closed her book and said very seriously, "Good," and gone to bed. He started the truck. He went home. He didn't know sitting in that truck that the next Tuesday would be the night everything changed. Not on the mat. In the parking lot. 15 minutes before class. With a man he hadn't met yet. Tuesday came the way Tuesdays do, too fast if you needed more time and too slow if you were anxious, landing somewhere in between, for Marcus, who was neither particularly anxious nor particularly patient, just moving through the week, the way he moved through most things, steadily, methodically, one item at a time. He dropped Amara at school. He fixed a broken door hinge at the community center that turned into a broken door frame, that turned into discovering the entire door had been installed wrong 3 years ago by someone who apparently thought physics was optional. He ate lunch at his desk, a turkey sandwich and apple water, while reading a maintenance log that revealed the East Corridor lighting was about to become someone's problem, and he was the someone. He handled it. He went back to his truck at 5:30 with grease on his forearms, and a particular kind of quiet satisfaction that comes from having solved things. He changed in the truck. Same gray t-shirt. He'd bought gym shorts. Finally, Amara had suggested this when she saw him changing his laundry, and said with devastating 8-year-old precision, "Daddy, you need specific clothes for specific things." He'd bought 2 pairs. Gray because he had apparently committed to a color scheme without deciding to. He pulled into the Birchwood parking lot 18 minutes before class, and that was when he saw the man leaning against the wall beside the entrance. How was maybe 60, maybe a little older built. The way old military men get built, not gym muscle, but functional muscle. The kind you can't fake and can't lose quickly, because it's not about bulk, it's about how the body learned to move when it mattered. He wore a plain button-down shirt, no military insignia, nothing identifying. His hair was mostly silver. His posture was the kind that certain people never lose: spine straight, weight, balanced head, still eyes covering his environment with the automatic thoroughness of long practice. I was watching the parking lot. He saw Marcus the same moment Marcus saw him. And Marcus knew the way you know certain things, the way pattern recognition works faster than conscious thought, that this man had been there before. Not in this parking lot specifically. In the same category of place. The same category of life. Marcus got out of the truck. The man straightened slightly. "You're Marcus Reed," the man said. Not a question. Marcus stopped walking. "I am. My name is Daniel Carter." He paused. "I used to train instructors for DevGru." The name of the unit landed between them quietly, the way significant things sometimes do not. With drama, but with weight. DevGru, Development Group. The Naval Special Warfare Unit that most people knew by its older name, SEAL Team 6. The unit at the absolute tip of the spear. Marcus looked at him. "How'd you find me?" Marcus asked. "Jason Whitmore called a friend who called a friend who ended up calling me," Carter said. "Nobody was trying to identify you. He just described what he saw and asked if anyone knew what that kind of movement meant." A slight pause. "I recognized the description." "You recognized a description. I recognized a specific way of redirecting force that's taught in exactly 3 programs in the United States military." Carter's eyes were steady, calm, entirely without aggression. "One of those programs I helped design." Marcus stood in the parking lot and said nothing. A moment passed. "I'm not here to expose anything," Carter said. "You left for your own reasons, and those are yours. I'm not interested in pulling anything back into the light that you put in the dark deliberately." He looked at Marcus for a moment. "I just wanted to put eyes on the man who put Jason Whitmore on his back in 4 seconds, because Jason Whitmore is the best young fighter I've seen in 15 years, and I've been training people for 28. He's good," Marcus said. "He knows what he's doing." "He's excellent," Carter said. "He's also got a problem, and he knows it. The ego's writing checks his character hasn't figured out how to cash yet." He paused. "That might be changing." "What do you want from me, Mr. Carter?" Carter looked at him directly. "Nothing right now. I just wanted to know who you were." A slight pause. "And I wanted you to know that someone in that building knows who you are, in case that matters to you." Marcus considered him. "Does Jason know you're out here?" "No." "Are you going to tell him?" Carter was quiet for a moment. "That depends," he said, "on whether you want me to." Another pause. The parking lot hummed with the distant sound of traffic on Birchwood Road. Somewhere a car alarm chirped and silenced itself. "Not yet," Marcus said finally. Carter nodded once. "Understood." He straightened fully, and Marcus saw in that movement the precise economy of a man who had trained his body for decades to do exactly what was needed and nothing extra. "For what it's worth," Carter said, "what you did. Tuesday, the way you controlled it, the placement, the care, you didn't want to hurt him." "No," Marcus said, "I didn't." "That's training," Carter said. "But it's also character. Those are separate things, and you've got both." He looked at Marcus steadily. "Not everyone who comes out of what you came out of keeps both." Marcus felt something move in him at that. Something old and complicated that he didn't have words for right there in a parking lot in Clover Ridge, Georgia on a Tuesday night in the middle of an ordinary week. He said, "I should get inside." "Yeah," Carter said, "you should." He pushed off the wall and walked toward his own car, and Marcus watched him go, and then Marcus turned and walked into the gym. Inside, Devin was already there warming up. He looked up when Marcus walked in, registered something in his expression, and said, "You okay?" "Fine," Marcus said. Devin looked at him for another second. "You look like someone just told you something you weren't expecting." "I'm fine," Marcus said again. Devin, to his credit, let it go. Jason came out of his office about 3 minutes later. He was different tonight again, a progression of the Thursday difference, moving in a direction that Marcus was watching with the careful attention of a man who was genuinely curious about where it was going. He was quieter at the start. Less performance, more focus. He called the class together and began the warm-up without the usual room-establishing moment, the dominance display opening that Marcus had clocked on Tuesday. 15 minutes into class, Jason paired Marcus with himself. "I want to work with you directly tonight," Jason said quietly enough that it was just between them. "Not for demonstration, not to prove anything. I want to feel how you move." Marcus looked at him. "What do you mean, feel how I move?" "I mean, you did something Tuesday that I've been trying to break down since it happened, and I can't. I can't reconstruct it. And that's never happened to me." He paused. "That bothers me. But more than bothering me, it interests me. And when something interests me, I want to understand it." "You're not going to understand it from one session," Marcus said. "I know. Understanding it might take a long time. I know that too." They squared up, and for the next 20 minutes, Jason Whitmore, regional champion black belt man, who had been the best person in every room he'd entered for the last 6 years, tried to figure out Marcus Reed. And Marcus, for his part, let him try. Not by dominating, not by demonstrating superiority. He moved at maybe 60% enough to show Jason what he was looking for, enough to give him real information, not enough to overwhelm the lesson. Because Marcus had learned a long time ago the difference between what you could show someone and what they could actually receive. You could only give a person as much truth as they could hold. Jason could hold more than Marcus had initially thought. How was fast? Genuinely fast, and his technical foundation was extraordinary. 15 years of disciplined practice, built into muscle memory. So deep it had become instinct. And he was adapting in real time, adjusting to what Marcus was doing, learning from each exchange, which was the mark of a truly good student, disguised inside the role of teacher. At one point, Jason tried a combination that was genuinely creative. Not textbook, not standard, something he'd invented himself in the moment, and Marcus stopped it, stepped around it, held Jason's arm in a position that was completely controlled and completely inescapable, and held it there for just a second. Not to hurt, not to demonstrate, to let him feel the geometry. Jason went still. "There," Marcus said quietly. "There what?" Jason said, voice careful. "That's what you've been looking for. The angle. It's not strength, it's geometry. It's the relationship between the vectors." He released him. Jason stood back. His breathing was slightly elevated. His eyes were processing something rapidly. "Who taught you that?" he said. "People who needed me to learn it very quickly," Marcus said. "In the military." Silence. "I'm not asking you to confirm anything," Jason said, and his voice was different now, quiet and genuine and stripped of everything performative. "I'm not asking who you were before this. I've trained with every serious martial artist in this region. I've trained with former military guys, law enforcement, MMA fighters. I've never felt anything like what I felt on Tuesday." He paused. "And I've never felt a teacher in someone who said they were there to learn." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You're a good student," Marcus said finally. "When you stop being busy, being the teacher." Jason stared at him. Then he did something that surprised Marcus. He laughed. Not the polished room-managing laugh from Tuesday. A real laugh, short and genuine, and a little self-deprecating. "My coach used to tell me that," he said. 7 years ago. I thought I'd outgrown the problem." "You hadn't. Clearly." He looked at Marcus with something that was open and real. "Will you come back? Not just for class. I mean, will you work with me?" Marcus thought about Daniel Carter in the parking lot. You've got both. The thing that moved in him when Carter said it. He thought about Amara saying, "You need to do something for yourself again." He thought about 4 seconds on a rubber mat when he was completely, entirely present. "I'll keep coming to class," Marcus said. "We'll see what happens." Jason nodded, turned back toward the rest of the students. And Marcus could see, watching him move, that something had genuinely shifted in the way he carried himself. Not diminished, not deflated, but as if a particular kind of tension had released, the tension of a man who had been working very hard to be the biggest thing in the room and had just been given permission to stop. It wasn't a dramatic shift, nothing visible from the outside. But Marcus saw it. After class, Devin caught him near the exit. "Hey," Devin said. "That old man in the parking lot before class." Marcus stopped. "You know him." "Why?" Marcus said. "Because when you came inside, your whole face was different than when you walked in from your car." Devin paused. "I notice things." "You should be careful with that," Marcus said. "Noticing things about people." "Why?" "Because sometimes people aren't ready for what you notice." Devin looked at him steadily. "Are you?" Marcus looked at the young man for a moment. This kid, this bright, perceptive, genuinely good kid, who was going to be remarkable at whatever he decided to put himself towards, standing here asking real questions in a gym in Georgia. "Go home, Devin," Marcus said, warmly, without edge. "Get some sleep." Devin grinned. "Yes, sir," he said, and there was something in the way he said "sir" that was not casual or ironic. Marcus walked out to the truck. He sat for a moment. I took out his phone and looked at it. He had a text from Amara's babysitter. She'd had dinner and was in the bath, and all was well. He had a text from his sister Renee that said, "Simply, call me this week. I know you're alive, but prove it." He had a work notification about the East Corridor lighting situation that he'd already handled. He had nothing from the past. The past didn't text, but it had shown up tonight in a parking lot. And something in Marcus Reed knew, with the certainty of a man who had learned to trust his instincts because his instincts had kept him alive, that it wasn't finished. That Daniel Carter standing outside a gym on a Tuesday night was not the end of something being stirred up. It was the beginning. He started the truck. He drove home through the warm Georgia night. He checked on Amara. Asleep, the elephant under her arm, the orange nightlight. Her face peaceful and completely unaware of every complicated thing happening in her father's interior landscape. He stood in her doorway for a long time. Then he went to his room, lay down, stared at the ceiling, and thought about geometry. About vectors and angles and the relationship between forces. About how the thing that made a redirect work wasn't power. It was understanding where something was already going and choosing where to put yourself in relation to it. He'd learned that in a very different context. He was starting to think it applied here too. To this gym, this town, this man, Jason Whitmore, this kid Devin, this silver-haired former trainer who'd found him in a parking lot. To all of it. He closed his eyes. He slept. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't dream about anything dark. He didn't sleep as well the second night. I thought he would. After the parking lot conversation with Carter, after the session with Jason, after the drive home, and Amara's sleeping face, and the ceiling staring, and the decision to let himself stop bracing, he thought exhaustion would do the work, and he'd go under clean and quiet. Instead, he lay there at 2 a.m. listening to the house settle, and thinking about things he hadn't let himself think about in 4 years. Not nightmares. He was careful to make that distinction even alone in the dark. Not the intrusive kind, not the ones that used to wake him sweat-soaked in the first year after he got out. Those had faded. They didn't vanish. He knew better than to believe they'd vanished, but they'd retreated to a manageable distance the way a scar retreats. Still there. Integrated. What kept him awake wasn't terror. It was memory. The functional kind. The kind that surfaces when something cracks a door open that you'd been keeping closed. Daniel Carter had cracked a door. Not maliciously. Carter was not a malicious man. Marcus had read him in the parking lot the same way he read everything thoroughly and fast. And what he'd gotten from Carter was precisely what Carter had presented, a straight-line man, no hidden angles, no agenda beyond honest curiosity. But the door was cracked regardless. And at 2 a.m, things come through cracked doors. He thought about Darius. He hadn't let himself think about Darius in 6 months, which was its own particular achievement and its own particular failure. Darius Coleman, who had grown up in Compton and had the fastest hands Marcus had ever seen on a human being, and who laughed at everything. Not because everything was funny, but because Darius had decided somewhere along the way that laughing was better than the alternative, and he'd made that decision fully and kept it. Even when things were not funny at all. Even in the dark, in enemy territory, in the specific kind of silence that meant something very bad was about to happen. Darius could find something to almost smile about. How was gone. 3 years now. An operation Marcus hadn't been on because he was stateside for Amara's appendectomy. She'd been 5. It was terrifying. She'd been fine. He'd stayed home an extra week because he couldn't make himself leave her hospital room, and Darius had shipped out with the rest of the team without him, and came back in a box. 3 years. Marcus lay in the dark and thought about Darius, and thought about the fact that Darius would have thought the situation with Jason Whitmore was the funniest thing that had happened in recent memory. He would have done the Marcus knew exactly what the impression would look like, could see it clearly. Darius puffing himself up and doing the walk of a man who knew he was being watched, and then doing a spectacular slow-motion fall to represent Tuesday's mat situation, complete with sound effects. He would have laughed for days. Marcus stared at the ceiling and felt the shape of that absence, the specific gravity of missing someone funny. Grief for serious people is one kind of weight. Grief for the person who made you laugh is another kind. Darius had been the person who made them all laugh. At 3:15 in the morning, Marcus got up, went to the kitchen, made tea, and sat at the table with his hands around the mug, and did something he almost never let himself do. He let himself miss it, not the danger, not the adrenaline. That's what people without the experience imagined you missed, and it was wrong. It was never the adrenaline. The adrenaline was awful. The adrenaline felt like your body trying to run away from itself. What he missed was the sense of absolute clarity. The way every ambiguous thing about civilian life, every social dynamic, every half-communicated expectation, every room full of unspoken rules. He was supposed to know. All of that went completely away when things were real. When the mission was in progress. When the only things that existed were the objective and the team and the present moment. He missed the present moment. He had been living inside his own head for 4 years. Inside the weight of what had happened, and the responsibility of what had to happen next, and the constant grinding calculation of how to keep Amara safe, and provided for, and loved, while also keeping the darkness contained, keeping it from getting on her. Keeping the man she saw every morning over burned eggs, or successful eggs, from looking like the man who sat at this table at 3 in the morning, missing his dead friend. He drank his tea. He thought Daniel Carter recognized it. Devin noticed something. Jason is asking questions. He thought, this is what happens when you let yourself be seen. He thought, maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. He went back to bed at 4. Slept until 6:15. Got up. Made breakfast oatmeal, not eggs, safe choice. Amara came to the table still half asleep and ate without commentary, which meant she wasn't fully operational yet, which was its own kind of sweet. He drove her to school. She kissed his cheek at the drop-off line and said without looking back, "You okay, Daddy?" "Fine," he said. She looked back at him then. Those eyes. "You have your 3 in the morning face." He blinked. "I have a 3 in the morning face. It's a little bit far away," she said. "You'll be okay, though." And she was out of the car and into the crowd of other kids before he could respond, her backpack bouncing, absolutely confident in her assessment and her prognosis. He sat in the drop-off line for a moment longer than he needed to. "You'll be okay, though." He drove to work. The East Corridor lights took his full attention until noon, which was what he needed. The second time Daniel Carter showed up, it was not in a parking lot. It was a Thursday, 2 weeks after the parking lot conversation, and Marcus was at the community center's front desk covering for the receptionist who had a dentist appointment, which was not technically his job, but was the kind of thing he did, because there was nobody else, and Marcus had never in his life been able to look at a gap and not fill it. He was entering maintenance logs into the computer when the front door opened and Carter walked in. Marcus looked up. Carter looked at him without surprise. He'd clearly known where Marcus worked, which Marcus had already assumed based on the parking lot encounter. I wasn't hiding the fact that he'd done his research. He walked to the desk with the deliberate pace of a man who'd decided something and was carrying through on it. "You're not avoiding me," Carter said. "I'm working," Marcus said. "You could have not come back to the gym." "I told you I'm there to learn something." "Right." Carter put both hands on the desk, not aggressive, just settling himself. "I want to tell you something. About Jason." Marcus leaned back slightly. "I'm listening." "He's competing next month. Regional championship. He's won it 4 years running." Carter paused. "This year I'm not sure he's going to win it." "Why not?" "Because something shifted in him after Tuesday, and I don't know yet if it shifted in the right direction or the wrong one. When you crack something open in a competitor, it goes one of 2 ways." He looked at Marcus directly. "Either they find something deeper than what they were using before, or the crack becomes a fracture." Marcus was quiet. "I've been his mentor for 3 years, Carter said. "Unofficially, since his own coach retired. I've been the person he calls when something doesn't make sense." He paused. "He called me after Tuesday. He'd already described what you did by the time I knew who you were, and when I found out I had to come see for myself." "You said that in the parking lot." "I'm saying the rest of it now." Carter's voice was steady. "He's a good man, underneath the performance. The performance is a habit, not his character. His character is solid." A pause. He needs something I can't give him. He needs to learn from someone who learned what they know in a context where failure had real consequences. Marcus stared at him. You're asking me to train him. I'm asking you to continue what you started, Carter said. By accident on a Tuesday night when you put him on the mat and helped him up and asked if he was okay. He paused. That was the lesson. You already started it. Marcus said nothing for a long moment. The community center lobby was quiet around them. Distant sounds of kids in the gym, a basketball rhythm from somewhere down the hall, the fluorescent hum of the lights Marcus had replaced himself 6 weeks ago. I'm not a teacher, Marcus said. What you did in that gym says otherwise. What I did in that gym was self-defense. That's not what Devin thinks, Carter said. That's not what Jason thinks. That's not what I think. He held Marcus's gaze. What do you think? Marcus thought about the 20 minutes working with Jason on Thursday. The geometry. That's what you've been looking for. The way Jason's face had changed when he understood it. The way teaching something actually transferring something real from one person to another had felt like something he hadn't expected to feel. I'll think about it, he said. Carter nodded once. That's enough for now. He straightened. He's at the gym every Tuesday and Thursday, same as you. He gets there an hour early. He turned toward the door. That hour before class, he works alone. He left. Marcus turned back to the maintenance logs. He stared at the screen for about 45 seconds without reading anything. Then he typed a line into the log that said, East Corridor lighting fully operational, and closed the program and sat there thinking about a man he'd met 3 weeks ago who had a fracture that might either become something deeper or something broken, and about whether he was the right person to have any role in which way it went. He thought about Darius again. About what Darius would say. You're already in it, man. You were in it the second you walked into that gym. You just hadn't admitted it yet. He heard it so clearly in Darius's specific voice with the California vowels and the particular cadence that was his alone, that it was almost like a presence in the room. He exhaled slowly. He was already in it. The following Tuesday he arrived at the gym an hour early. He almost talked himself out of it twice on the drive over. He wasn't a coach. He wasn't here to insert himself into Jason Whitmore's training. He had his own reasons for being at Birchwood, and those reasons were specific and personal, and didn't include taking on responsibility for someone else's developmental arc. He had enough responsibility. He had an 8-year-old who gave his Rice numerical scores. That was plenty. He pulled into the parking lot. Jason's car was already there. Marcus sat in the truck for approximately 4 minutes. Then he got out and went inside. Jason was on the heavy bag when Marcus walked in. He heard the door looked up and stopped mid-combination. He stared at Marcus. Then he looked at the clock on the wall, then back at Marcus. You're early, Jason said. Carter told me you work alone the hour before class. Something moved through Jason's face, processing, recalibrating. Carter's been here. He came to my job. Jason lowered his hands from guard position. He was breathing steadily from the bagwork chest, moving with the even rhythm of a man in real condition. He looked at Marcus with an expression that Marcus was learning to read. It was the expression Jason got when he was genuinely uncertain, which was rarer than it should be for a 26-year-old and more honest than his default presentation. What did he tell you? Jason asked. That you're competing next month and he doesn't know which way you're going to go. Jason laughed short and not particularly amused. Yeah, that's Carter. He pulled off one of his gloves. What do you think? I think you're good enough to win. But, Marcus walked toward the mat. But good enough to win and ready to win are different things. Jason watched him. What's the difference? Good enough is about your skill. Ready is about your head. Marcus stopped at the edge of the mat. Your head's been somewhere else since Tuesday 3 weeks ago. Because of you. Because of what happened Tuesday. I was just the circumstance. Marcus paused. You can't undo a realization. Once you see something, you can't unsee it. The only question is what you do with the sight. Jason stood there with one glove on and one glove off, and looked at Marcus Reed with an expression that had no performance in it whatsoever. I've been in this gym since I was 11 years old, Jason said quietly. 15 years. I've won more fights than I can remember. I've trained harder than most people can imagine. And 3 weeks ago, a man walked in for his first class and put me on the mat in 4 seconds and then asked if I was okay. He paused. I've been trying to figure out what to do with that. What have you come up with? That I've been fighting to prove something. And that's different from fighting because you love it. He looked at the floor for a second, then back up. I used to love it. When I was a kid, before the trophies, before the reputation, I used to come to the gym and just lose track of time because I loved how it felt to move like this. A pause. That got buried somewhere. Under the needing to win, Marcus said. Under the needing to be the best, Jason said. Which is different from winning. Winning is measurable. Being the best is an appetite that doesn't have a bottom. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped onto the mat. Glove on, he said. Jason blinked. What? Put the glove back on. Marcus moved to the center. Show me what you actually love about this, not what you've been using to win. Show me the thing that made you walk into a gym when you were 11 and lose track of time. Jason stared at him. Then, something happened in his face that Marcus would remember later. Something cracked open that was not a fracture. Something cracked open the way a fist cracks open to become a hand. He put the glove back on. He walked to the center of the mat, and they worked. For the next 40 minutes they worked. Not competitively, not demonstrably, not with anything to prove in any direction. Marcus moved and Jason responded, and Jason moved and Marcus redirected, and somewhere in the middle of it, Jason found something. Marcus felt him find it. Felt the quality of his movement change, felt the calculation leave, and something more fluid and real come in. Felt the difference between a fighter performing and an athlete being. They were 15 minutes in when Jason threw a combination that was completely, genuinely beautiful. Not powerful, not a submission, not a takedown. Just beautiful. Efficient and precise and creative and real. The kind of movement that only happens when the mind gets out of the way. Marcus stopped it, held the position. There, he said. Did you feel that? Jason was breathing harder now. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I felt it. That's what you're looking for. That's what's been missing. It wasn't missing, Marcus said. It was buried, under all the things you put on top of it. Jason looked at him. How do you know this stuff? Marcus released the position. Because I put the same things on top of the same kind of feeling, he said, and spent a long time forgetting it was there. They looked at each other on that mat, a 26-year-old champion and a 34-year-old man who used to be something he never talked about, and for a moment the gap between them was very small. Almost nothing. Just two people who had buried something real under the weight of what they thought they needed to be. Jason said very quietly, "What was yours? The thing you buried?" Marcus thought about Darius, about the clarity, about the feeling of being completely present, the ability to be in a room without managing it, he said, to just be in it. A long pause. Are you getting it back? Jason asked. Marcus looked around the gym. The familiar smell of rubber and effort. Devin's equipment bag already by the wall, meaning Devin was somewhere nearby. Carter's absence in the room and presence everywhere around them. Working on it, he said. The other students started filtering in at 6 o'clock. Devin arrived at 5:57 because Devin was always early, and he walked onto the training floor and stopped when he saw Marcus and Jason standing together in the center of the mat with the air of two people who had just been through something. He read it immediately. Devin read everything immediately, and he said nothing. Just dropped his bag and started warming up. Class proceeded. And it was different again. The difference accumulating Tuesday by Tuesday, Thursday by Thursday. The way water accumulates in a canyon slowly, then all at once. 12 days before the regional championship, something happened that none of them had planned for. Marcus was leaving the gym after a Thursday class later than usual, because he'd stayed to help Devin with a specific defensive gap that Devin had asked him about with the earnest urgency of a young man who was genuinely committed to improvement, and they'd worked it for 20 minutes after the other students left. Jason was in his office doing paperwork. The gym was quiet. Marcus was at the door when he heard Jason's voice, tight and controlled, coming through the partially open office door. "That's not fair, Dad." Marcus stopped. He shouldn't have. He started moving again immediately toward the exit, because that was a private conversation, and he had no business near it. But the voice that came back through the phone was loud enough that he caught it before he cleared the door. "I'm just saying, Jason. A championship's a championship. You can't let yourself get distracted by some I don't even know who this person is, some guy who walked into your gym." Marcus went still. "He's not a distraction," Jason said. "He's... What is he? Because from where I'm standing, you've spent 3 weeks talking about some mystery man, instead of preparing for the most important competition of your year. Maybe this is more important than the competition." A pause on the phone so sharp Marcus could feel it from the hallway. "What did you just say?" Jason's voice was lower now, steadier. "I've been winning this championship for 4 years, Dad, and every year I win it, I feel less, not more, less." A pause. "Maybe what I've been missing isn't more training. Maybe it's why." The silence from the phone was long. "You sound like you're about to quit," Jason's father said. "I'm not quitting anything. I'm trying to understand something." "You know what I understand. I understand that a man walked into your gym and embarrassed you in front of your students, and now you're having some kind of crisis. And I understand that that's exactly what he wants." "He doesn't want anything," Jason said, "for your gym and embarrassed you in front of your students, and now you're having some kind of crisis. And I understand that that's exactly what he wants." "He doesn't want anything," Jason said firmly. "He's the most uninterested in wanting anything person I've ever met. That's half of what's so..." He stopped. "Never mind. Jason, I'll win the championship, Dad. That's not what I'm worried about." "Then what are you worried about?" A long pause. "I'm worried about what I'm going to feel like after I do," Jason said. Marcus walked out of the gym. He sat in his truck in the dark parking lot for a minute. The Georgia night was doing its warm and thick thing, crickets and distant traffic, the ordinary soundtrack of an ordinary place. He thought about what Jason had just said. "I'm worried about what I'm going to feel like after I do." He had heard those words before in different forms in different contexts. He had said them himself once to a chaplain on a base in Virginia 3 weeks before he got out, sitting in a small office with fluorescent lighting and a box of tissues on the desk that he hadn't used. He'd said, "I'm worried that I'm going to come home and feel like I left the only real thing behind." And the chaplain had said something gentle and professional and not quite right. And Marcus had nodded and gone back to his bunk and started the process of getting out. It had taken him 4 years to find this gym. He thought about that. He thought about the fact that a 26-year-old man in a martial arts gym in Clover Ridge, Georgia, was sitting in his office at 9:30 at night, saying the same thing that Marcus had said to a chaplain in Virginia, and that Marcus, who had walked into this building by accident because his 8-year-old told him he needed a hobby, might be the only person in proximity who actually understood what it meant. He started the truck. He drove home. He checked on Amara. Asleep. Elephant. Orange light. Peaceful face. He went to the kitchen and called his sister Renee, who picked up on the second ring, because Renee always picked up even late, because Renee had decided years ago that being the sister of Marcus Reed meant you kept the phone close. "Talk to me," Renee said without preamble. "I'm in something," Marcus said. "I'm not sure how deep." "Is it dangerous?" "No, it's a gym." A pause. "A gym. A martial arts gym. Amara told me to go." He heard Renee exhale slow and careful, the way she exhaled when she was revising her picture of the situation. "Go on." So he told her. Not everything, not the Carter conversation, or the depth of the 3 a.m. Darius thoughts. But the outline. Jason, the mat, the 4 seconds, what had happened in the week since. Devon. The hour before class. When he finished, Renee was quiet for a moment. "This man Jason," she said. "The one who called you whatever it was. Said he'd drop me in seconds." "Right. And you put him on the mat. Yes. And now you're training him. It's not a formal thing. Marcus. Her voice was gentle and entirely without patience for the distinction. You're training him. He exhaled. Yeah, I guess I am. And this is what does it feel like when you're in it. He thought about 40 minutes on the mat with Jason finding the buried thing. About Devon's gap in his defensive technique and the moment it clicked. About Amara's face at the drop-off line saying you'll be okay though. Present, he said. Renee was quiet. It feels present, he said. I'm not in my head. I'm not managing. I'm just there. Baby, Renee said very softly. Don't. I'm not doing anything. I'm just... A pause. I've been waiting 4 years for you to say that word. Present? Yeah. He stood at the kitchen window, the quiet street, the neighbor's porch light, the ordinary dark of an ordinary American neighborhood at 10:15 on a Thursday night. Carter thinks I should tell Jason who I am, Marcus said. Do you trust Carter? I think so. Yeah. What do you think about it? I think some things change when they're spoken out loud. He paused. I've been comfortable with the silence. The silence it's been protective. Of me. Of Amara. Of how we live here. But silence has a cost. I know that. I've always known that. He paused. The cost catches up eventually. Renee said, What does your gut say? He thought about Jason in that office. I'm worried about what I'm going to feel like after I do. He thought about what it would mean to let someone understand why that statement didn't have to be the end of the sentence. To give someone the thing Marcus had taken 4 years to find in a burned egg kitchen with an 8-year-old who saw too much. My gut says there's a right time, Marcus said. And it's not yet. But it's coming. It's coming. They talked for another 20 minutes about other things. Renee's job. Amara's upcoming school play This Cabinet Hinge. Marcus had fixed for the 5th time, and now suspected needed full replacement because the door frame itself was warped. Normal things. Anchoring things. When he hung up, he felt more like himself. He went to bed at 11:15. He slept without the door cracking, and 9 days later, on a Thursday evening, 11 minutes before class was supposed to start, 3 men walked into the Birchwood Academy, and none of them had come to train. Marcus was already on the mat working a simple drill alone when he felt the change in the room. Not saw felt. The way the air shifted when people entered with a specific purpose that was different from the purpose of everyone else around them. He looked up. 3 men. Mid-30s, one older. They walked in with the proprietary comfort of people who had been there before, who felt entitled to the space. The older one barrel-chested, moving with the practiced ease of someone who used to be in very good shape and was coasting on the memory of it. Looked around the room until he found Jason coming out of his office. Whitmore, the man said. Jason stopped, and Marcus watched Jason's face do something he hadn't seen it do before. Go careful, Mr. Beaumont, Jason said. The name meant something to the room. Devon, who had just walked in behind Marcus, went very still. 2 other students who had arrived early exchanged a look. Heard you had some trouble in your class recently, Beaumont said. He said it pleasantly, the pleasant voice of a man who had learned that pleasantness was its own kind of pressure. Heard someone came in here and gave you a hard time in front of your people. That's not what happened, Jason said. No. Beaumont looked around the room. His gaze passed over Marcus without pausing. Marcus was just another person on the mat. Just another student, just another face. Because from where I'm sitting, you've got a month until regionals, and you've been distracted. And I've got money on you, Jason. A lot of money. The pleasantness stayed in his voice, but the edge under it was clear. I don't like being made to worry. Jason looked at the man steadily, and Marcus watched Jason make a choice. Watched it happen in real time. Watched him choose not to perform, not to manage, not to give Beaumont the reassurance he was fishing for. My training is my business, Jason said. The room temperature dropped about 3 degrees. Beaumont looked at him. Then his gaze moved slowly, deliberately across the room again. This time it stopped on Marcus. Not because he recognized him. Because Marcus hadn't looked away. Most people look away from that kind of scan. It's instinct. Beaumont was the kind of man who used that instinct against people who used the reflex of avoidance to establish dominance in a room. Marcus simply looked back. Steady, still, not challenging, just present. Beaumont stared at him for a moment. Then he looked back at Jason. "We'll talk after regionals," he said, and walked out with his two companions, and the door closed behind them, and the room exhaled. Devin said very quietly, "Who is that guy?" Jason looked at Marcus, and the look on his face was complicated, shaken, resolute, a little afraid, more than a little angry, and underneath all of it, something that looked like it might be a relief. "Old story," Jason said. "I'll tell you later." But Marcus was already understanding. The weight Jason was competing under was not just about trophies. There was money involved. There was Beaumont involved. And Beaumont had just looked at Marcus Reed, like Marcus Reed was a variable he needed to account for. Marcus had been a variable people needed to account for before. It never ended the way those people expected. He turned back to his drill. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. And somewhere in the back of his chest, in the place where Darius Coleman used to live, and the clarity used to live, and the present moment used to live, something clicked into focus like a scope on a target. How was in it? He had been in it since Tuesday 3 weeks ago. He just finally admitted it. After Beaumont left, nobody said anything for almost 30 seconds. That's a long time for a room full of people to stay silent. 30 seconds of nothing but the hum of the lights and the distant sound of traffic on Birchwood Road, and the particular quality of air that a threatening man leaves behind when he walks out of a space. Heavy, slightly charged. The way air feels before a storm decides what it's going to do. Devin broke it first. Not with words, just with movement. He picked up his water bottle, took a slow drink, set it back down. The ordinary gesture of a young man reminding himself and the room that ordinary things were still happening and the world was still turning, which was exactly the right instinct. Marcus noticed it, filed it. Devin had good instincts. Jason was still standing in the same spot he'd been when Beaumont walked in. He hadn't moved during the whole exchange, hadn't stepped back, hadn't crossed his arms, hadn't done any of the physical things people do when they're trying to manage being cornered. He'd stood his ground with the particular stillness of a man deciding in real time who he was going to be. Now he exhaled through his nose and rolled his shoulders once, and said to the room in general, "Sorry about that, let's get started." And class began. But the temperature was different, and everyone felt it, and nobody mentioned it, which was its own kind of social agreement. The unspoken decision to let Jason lead, and not make him carry the weight of explaining something he clearly wasn't ready to explain. Marcus ran through the warm-up. He moved on autopilot, which wasn't the same as not paying attention. His body knew the drills now, 3 weeks in enough that he could execute while his mind worked a separate problem. The problem was Beaumont. The problem was what Beaumont's presence meant about the architecture of Jason's life that Marcus hadn't known about until 11 minutes before class. Money on you, Jason. A lot of money. That was not the statement of a fan. That was the statement of a man who had made an investment and considered the investee an asset. The pleasantness in Beaumont's voice when he said it was the pleasantness of ownership. Marcus had heard that particular vocal quality before, in contexts that bore no resemblance to a martial arts gym in Georgia, but the quality itself was universal. It was the sound of a man who believed he had a claim. The question was how deep that claim went and how long it had been accumulating. He watched Jason teach. Jason was good tonight, focused in the way that pressure sometimes focuses people, the way a deadline makes clear what actually matters. He was present with his students in a way that Marcus had been watching develop over 3 weeks, the gradual emergence of a teacher from underneath the performer. And tonight, that teacher was present and real and working hard. But Marcus caught it twice in the first 20 minutes of class. The flicker. Jason's gaze going briefly distant. His hand once forming a fist at his side during a pause, and then consciously releasing. The micro-expressions of a man managing something large in a contained space. Marcus knew those micro-expressions. He'd worn them himself for 4 years. After class, when the students filtered out, And Devin gave Marcus a look that said, "I'm going to wait outside for a minute, and you should probably talk to him." Marcus walked over to where Jason was putting away equipment. "Tell me about Beaumont," Marcus said. Jason didn't look up from the equipment. He kept stacking pads with the methodical efficiency of a man using physical task as emotional delay. "He's nobody. He's not nobody. He's a problem that's been around for a while. How long?" A pause. Jason set down the last pad. Now he looked up. 2 years. Maybe a little more. He leaned against the wall. "He runs a gambling operation. Not huge, not organized crime level, but real. Sports betting, local competitions, some regional stuff. He found me when I won my 3rd championship and approached me afterward." He stopped. "He said he believed in my career and wanted to invest." "And you took the money?" Jason closed his eyes for a second. "I needed it. The gym was struggling. I had 3 instructors I couldn't pay on time and equipment that was falling apart, and a lease renewal coming up that I didn't have the numbers for." He opened his eyes. He made it sound like sponsorship, like a patron. He talked about it like he was a boxing promoter who believed in his fighter. A pause. "It took me 8 months to understand what it actually was." He owns a piece of your results," Marcus said. "He owns a piece of my results," Jason confirmed. Flat, stating a fact he'd been living with for a long time. "Every competition I enter, that he's placed money on, which is most of them, my winning, is his winning. And he is very invested in me winning." He paused. "The conversation you witnessed tonight was his polite version of reminding me that. And his impolite version." Jason looked at him steadily. "I've seen that too." The room was quiet. Marcus said, "How much? Total across 2 years." Jason shook his head. "Enough that paying it back isn't a one-time thing. Enough that I can't just write a check and walk away." He pushed off the wall. "I know how it sounds. I know what it looks like. I made a bad decision when I was 24 and scared about losing this place, and I have been living with that decision." "Does Carter know?" "Carter suspects. We've never directly discussed it." He paused. I found out 11 minutes before class," Marcus said. "And now you're what? Going to tell me what a bad idea it was?" "No," Marcus said. "You know it was a bad idea. You don't need me to confirm that." He paused. "What I want to know is what you want to do about it." Jason stared at him. "What I want and what I can do are not the same thing." "That's usually where the problem lives," Marcus agreed. "Right between those 2 things." He picked up his bag. "Think about it. Between now and regionals, think about what you actually want. Not what Beaumont wants. Not what your father wants. What you want after you win." He paused at the door. "Because you're going to win. That's not the question. The question is who you're going to be after." He left. Devin was in the parking lot, leaning against his car with his arms crossed, not pretending he hadn't been waiting. "How bad?" Devin asked. "Complex," Marcus said. "There's a guy named Beaumont who shows up sometimes," Devin said. "I've seen him twice before. Once it was okay. Once it was not okay." He paused. The not okay time, Jason didn't talk to anyone for 3 days, and then came back and trained like he was trying to destroy himself. Marcus looked at the young man. "How do you know all of this?" "Because I pay attention," Devin said. "You told me to be careful with that. I'm trying. But sometimes things are just visible." He paused. "You're good for him. Whatever's happening, whatever you are, whatever this is, you're good for him. I've been coming here 4 months, and I've never seen him teach the way he's been teaching the last 3 weeks." Marcus said nothing. "I just thought you should know that," Devin said. "Since you seem like the kind of person who makes decisions about whether to stay involved in things. I wanted you to have that information." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. "You're going to be remarkable," he said quietly. "Whatever you decide to put yourself toward." Devin blinked. "That's thank you." A pause. "Does that mean you're staying?" Marcus opened his truck door. "Go home, Devin." "Yes, sir," Devin said. And this time Marcus heard it more clearly, the weight in it, the respect that wasn't casual or ironic, but was real and specific and chosen. He drove home thinking about the geometry of what he'd walked into. Not a single problem with a single solution. A network. Jason's talent and Jason's debt. Carter's investment in Jason's future. Devon watching everything with those clear young eyes. Beaumont, who had looked at Marcus in the gym, the way a man looks at an unfamiliar variable in an equation he thought he'd solved. Amara, who had started this whole thing by telling her father he needed something for himself, and who had no idea what she'd set in motion. And Marcus, who had walked in for a beginner class, and was now sitting in the middle of something that had tendrils reaching backward through years of Jason's life, and forward into a regional championship with money behind it, that belonged to a man who had the specific pleasant-voiced confidence of someone who believed consequences applied to other people. He pulled into his driveway. He sat for a moment. He thought, when is the right time? I thought about what Renee had said. Some things change when they're spoken out loud. He thought about the cost of silence. He thought about Darius. He went inside. Amara was still awake, which she wasn't supposed to be sitting on the couch under a blanket with a book that she closed with the specific guilty speed of a child who has been caught but intends to negotiate rather than surrender. It's 9:45, Marcus said. I know. You have school tomorrow. I know. Why are you still up? She considered him. You have your Beaumont face. He stopped. I don't have a who is Beaumont. I don't know who Beaumont is, she said patiently. I made up the name. You have a face that means something complicated happened, and you're carrying it home, and I wanted to make sure you were okay before I went to sleep. He looked at his 8-year-old daughter. I'm okay, he said. Okay, or okay, like you're going to stare at the ceiling. Amara. Daddy. He sat down on the couch next to her. She immediately leaned into him the way she had since she was small, tucking herself under his arm, like she belonged there, which she did. Something complicated is happening, he said, at the gym. Good complicated or bad complicated, both kinds at once. She thought about this. Like when I had to do the science fair and the project was going well, but then Maya's project was really good, and I didn't know if mine was still going to be good enough, but then it was a little bit like that, he said, but larger. Are you going to fix it? I was quiet for a moment. Outside the neighborhood was quiet and dark. The porch light still on Renee's timer. The familiar specific quiet of a house where two people live and have made it into a home. I don't know yet if it's mine to fix, he said honestly. Amara was quiet for a moment, thinking with that particular 8-year-old seriousness that he had learned to respect. Daddy, she said, when the cabinet hinge was broken, you didn't keep asking if it was your job to fix it. You just fixed it because you were there and you knew how. He sat with that for a moment. Then he said, go to bed. Okay. She climbed off the couch book under her arm. At the hallway she turned. You're going to be okay. You always figure it out. Stated with the full confidence of a person who has never seen her father. Not figure it out, which was both a tribute and a weight, and Marcus carried both of them. Good night, baby, he said. Good night, Daddy. He sat on the couch alone after she left. He made a decision. Not about Beaumont. Not yet. The Beaumont situation required information he didn't have and time he needed to take. He made a decision about the other thing. The door that had been cracking open since Carter appeared in a parking lot. Since Devon said something made that. Since Jason said, who are you for real? The right time was coming. He could feel it the way you feel a change in pressure. The way the air in a room changes before something significant shifts in it. He would be ready when it came. 3 days later, Carter called him. Marcus was on a ladder at the community center, replacing a light fixture in the east corridor, the same corridor that had been his problem for 2 weeks now, finally completely resolved, which gave him a satisfaction he didn't entirely understand, but had stopped questioning when his phone vibrated in his pocket. He came down the ladder, checked the screen. Carter's number, which he'd saved after the parking lot, because he'd known Carter would call again. Carter, he said, There's a problem, Carter said. The tone landed immediately. Not alarm exactly. The flat, contained voice of a man reporting a situation accurately. Talk, Marcus said. Beaumont approached two of Jason's potential championship opponents this week, Carter said. Offered them money to throw their matches. Both of them said no. One of them reported it. A pause. It went up the chain of the regional sanctioning body. There's an investigation starting. Marcus was quiet. If Beaumont gets formally tied to Jason, Carter continued, whether Jason knew about the approach or not, Jason's championship standing is at risk. His license to compete could be suspended. A pause. And his license to operate this gym could be reviewed. Jason didn't know about the approaches, Marcus said. I believe that. You believe that. The sanctioning body may not care about the distinction. Carter paused. Beaumont is moving faster than I expected. I think he's worried about the investigation, and he's trying to lock in a win before it lands on him. Another pause. Which means regionals in 6 days just became significantly more complicated than a competition. Marcus leaned against the corridor wall. Above him, the new light fixture burned clean and bright. What does Jason know? Marcus asked. I called him before I called you. He knows about the investigation. He doesn't know the full scope yet. Carter paused. He asked me if I thought he should pull out of the competition. What did you tell him? I told him I'd call you. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. Carter. I know, Carter said. I know it's not straightforward, but I want his mentor's read on this, and you're his mentor, whether either of you has used that word yet. Marcus opened his eyes. The bright corridor, the new light. The problem that was never just one problem. He shouldn't pull out, Marcus said. Because pulling out looks like guilt even when it isn't. And because Beaumont wants a specific outcome and pulling out is one of the ways to give it to him without being on the mat. He paused. Jason competes. He wins clean. That's the answer to Beaumont that doesn't require lawyers or investigators to make. Carter was quiet for a moment. And the financial entanglement. That's a longer problem. That gets handled after. He paused. But the competition, the result his standing as a fighter, that's the part that belongs entirely to Jason, and nobody can touch it as long as he shows up and does his job. Carter said very simply, good. Tell him I want to work with him, Marcus said. Tomorrow morning, before his regular session, 6 a.m. He'll be there. I know he will, Marcus said. He hung up, climbed back up the ladder, replaced the last fixture, came down, packed his tools, walked to the next job on his list. He was present, entirely present. 6 in the morning. Jason was already on the mat when Marcus arrived. He wasn't on the bag. He wasn't running drills. He was sitting cross-legged in the center of the mat with his hands on his knees, eyes open, just sitting. Marcus had been around enough experienced fighters to know what that was not meditation in the self-help sense, not performance, just the specific act of a man making himself be still, long enough to hear himself think. He didn't interrupt it. He dropped his bag by the wall, changed his shoes, walked to the mat, and sat down across from Jason. Not close. About 8 feet between them. And sat. They sat like that for 4 minutes. Neither of them spoke. The gym made its small sounds around them, the settling of the building, the distant hum of the city, waking up outside. Jason said without preamble, I should have told you about Beaumont. You told me when you were ready. I should have been ready sooner. Maybe? Marcus looked at him. Would it have changed anything? Jason thought about it. No, he admitted. The situation is the situation regardless of when you knew about it. He looked at his hands. Carter told me what you said, about competing, about not pulling out. Do you agree with it? Yes. Flat, certain. I'm not built to walk away from something because something else is complicated. He paused. That's probably a flaw. It's also a quality, Marcus said. Depends entirely on what you're not walking away from. Jason looked at him. I need to know something. Ask. What you said that first night when I put you on the mat, and you were on the mat looking up at me, and then it was the other way around. You asked if I was okay. He paused. Was that a tactic? Was that I've been thinking about this? The perfect psychological move. Disarm the opponent after demonstrating superiority. Was that something you were taught? Marcus looked at him steadily. No, he said. I asked because I wanted to know if you were okay. Jason held his gaze. That's what I thought, he said quietly. That's what made it. He stopped, started again. I've been in this sport for 15 years. I've had people be gracious in victory. I've had people be generous in defeat. I've never had someone put me on the mat and immediately instinctively care whether I was physically okay. He paused. That's not how fighters think. It's how people think, Marcus said. When they haven't lost track of which one they are. The silence between them was different now. Not empty. Full. Tell me what I need to do for the next 6 days, Jason said. Stop training your offense, Marcus said. You don't need more offense. Your offense is already championship level, and it's been championship level for 2 years. He leaned forward slightly. Spend the next 6 days training your mind. Train the space between stimulus and response. Train the ability to be hit and not react from fear. Train the ability to be in a difficult moment and stay present in it instead of running from it. He paused. Because Beaumont is a difficult moment, and the sanctioning body investigation is a difficult moment, and regionals is a difficult moment, and you need to be able to be present in all of them simultaneously without any of them pulling you out of yourself. Jason listened. He listened the way he'd been learning to listen, not waiting for a pause to respond, but actually receiving. That's what you do, Jason said slowly. That's how you move. You're present in a way that there's no gap in you. There's no moment where you're managing what's happening. You're just in it. It took a long time to get there, Marcus said. And I lose it sometimes. Last night I was staring at my ceiling again. What brings you back? Marcus thought about Amara on the couch. The blanket. The book closed too fast. You always figure it out. He thought about Carter's voice on the phone flat, and certain trusting Marcus's read on the situation. He thought about Devon saying you're good for him. People, he said. The specific people who are in my specific life and need specific things from me. He paused. Presence is easier when it's for someone else. The trick is learning to do it for yourself too. Jason was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Marcus, who were you before? The question hung in the space between them. Marcus looked at Jason Whitmore, 26 years old. 15 years of discipline and sacrifice and genuine talent, tangled up in someone else's money and his own ego's long reach, and a father who measured love in championships, standing at the edge of something that could either break him or forge him, depending entirely on what he chose in the next 6 days. I thought about the cost of silence. He thought about the right time. He looked at Jason and said, I was a Navy SEAL. The words were quiet. They landed the way quiet things sometimes do, not with a bang, but with the specific weight of truth, which settles differently than everything else. It doesn't crash. It arrives. Jason didn't move. For 11 years, Marcus said. I deployed multiple times. I operated in places I can't name, in situations I won't describe. I lost people. Friends. The best people I've ever known. He paused. And when I had Amara and her mother left and I was looking at this little girl who needed a father who came home every night, I walked away from it. Not because I was broken. Not because I couldn't do it anymore. He paused. Because she needed me more than the mission did. And that was the clearest priority call I've ever made. Jason was still completely still. I moved here because nobody knew me here, Marcus said. Because I could be just a man with a job and a daughter. Because ordinary felt like the safest thing I could offer her. He looked at Jason steadily. I am not ordinary. I have never been ordinary. And I have spent 4 years trying to be, which is its own kind of lie. And my 8-year-old daughter keeps looking at me with these old eyes and seeing through it. The gym was absolutely silent. Carter knew, Jason said. His voice was careful processing. Carter recognized the movement pattern. He figured it out. Devon thinks something. He doesn't know what. Marcus paused. You're the first person I've told directly. Jason sat with that. The weight of being the first person. The specific gravity of being trusted with something someone has been carrying alone. Why? He asked. Why now? Why me? Because you asked, Marcus said. For real. Not to satisfy curiosity. Not to categorize me. You asked because you needed to know who was standing in front of you. He paused. And because I think you needed to hear that a man can walk away from the most intense thing he's ever done and still be himself. On the other side, still functional, still present. He looked at Jason. Whatever comes after the championship, whatever comes after Beaumont, whatever comes after you're still you, that doesn't go away. Jason looked at him for a long time. Then he said, voice rough, thank you. Don't thank me, Marcus said. Go win your championship. Something shifted in Jason's face. Not the polished confidence of Tuesday night 3 weeks ago. Something underneath that. Something real and earned and chosen. He stood up. He walked to the heavy bag, and he started to work. Marcus watched him for a moment. The quality of the movement genuinely different. Not performing for the room. Not competing with a memory. Just a man doing something he'd loved for 15 years before he forgot that he loved it, and finding it again and committing to it with the full weight of who he actually was. Devin came in at 6:45, saw the two of them, and stopped. He looked at Jason on the bag. He looked at Marcus, watching Jason. He read the room with those clear young eyes. He set down his bag, picked up his gear, and said nothing. He just joined the work. And outside the Birchwood Academy on a Thursday morning, 6 days before the regional championship, the sun came up over Clover Ridge, Georgia, and the ordinary day began, and inside 3 people prepared for something that was not ordinary at all. Carter arrived at 7:15. He stood in the doorway for a moment looking at the 3 of them. He looked at Marcus. Marcus gave him a small nod. Carter understood it immediately. He walked in, dropped his jacket on a chair, and said to Jason, "Show me what you've got." And Jason showed him. And it was not what it had been 3 weeks ago. It was something better, something true. And in the back of Marcus Reed's chest, in the place where the weight used to live, something lightened. Not completely, not finally, but measurably. Enough to notice. Enough to be grateful for. I thought Darius would have loved this. And for the first time in 3 years, thinking that didn't hurt the way it usually did. It just felt like truth. The morning of the regional championship, Marcus burned the eggs again. Not badly this time. Just slightly. The edges darkened while he was standing at the kitchen window thinking about geometry angles and vectors and the space between stimulus and response. And by the time he turned around, the pan was telling him quietly but firmly that his attention was required elsewhere. Amara walked in, looked at the pan, looked at him and said, "It's okay. The slightly burned ones taste better anyway." He looked at his daughter. "I made that up," she admitted. "But you looked like you needed to hear it." He laughed. An actual laugh. The kind that comes from somewhere real. And Amara grinned. The wide grin that was her mother's grin. The one that still occasionally caught him off guard with how much it looked like someone else and how completely it also looked like her. He scraped the eggs onto plates. She ate without scoring them. That was mercy, and she knew it, and he was grateful. "Today's the competition," she said. "It is." "Are you going?" He hadn't planned to go. He'd worked with Jason for 6 days, 6 mornings in that gym before the sun was fully up. 6 sessions of stripping the performance away and finding what was underneath it. And he had told himself that his part was the preparation and not the event. That he was a maintenance technician from Clover Ridge and not a corner man. That the championship was Jason's and Carter's and had nothing to do with Marcus Reed. He'd told himself that for 6 days and every morning he'd believed it a little less. "Yes," he said. "I'm going." Amara put her fork down, looked at him with those eyes. "Good," she said quietly. "He needs you there." "You don't know that. You've been coming home different for 6 days," she said. "Not bad different, like when a thing is almost finished and you can feel it about to be done. You come home like that." She picked her fork back up. "That means whatever's happening is going to finish today. And when things finish, the people in them should be there." He stared at his 8-year-old for a moment. "How are you like this?" he asked. "You raised me," she said simply, and kept eating. He dropped her at his sister Renee's. Renee had driven up from Atlanta the night before, ostensibly to see Amara and take her to a movie, not ostensibly to be nearby, in case her brother needed something. But Marcus knew better, and Renee knew he knew better. And they had the specific relationship of two people who communicated most clearly through what they didn't say directly. When he pulled up to Renee's rented room at the extended stay on Route 9, Renee came out to the car while Amara ran inside to find the remote. She leaned in the passenger window and looked at Marcus with the clear-eyed assessment she'd been deploying on him since they were children. "Talk to me," she said. "I'm fine." "I know you're fine. That's not what I asked." She paused. "Today's the day something changes." "Why does everyone I love know things before I tell them?" "Because you're readable when you stop trying not to be," Renee said, "which you've apparently been doing for a few weeks now." She looked at him steadily. "Whatever happens today, you remember who you are before you walk in there." "I know who I am, Marcus." Her voice dropped. "I mean all of it. Not just the maintenance technician, not just Amara's dad, all of it, the whole man." She held his gaze. "Don't shrink yourself for a room. You stopped doing that in the 3rd grade when Donnie Williams tried to make you feel small for being smart. You remember what happened to Donnie Williams?" "I do not remember what happened to Donnie Williams. He's fine, he sells insurance in Delaware, that's not the point." She straightened. "Go, be there, be all of you." He drove to the regional championship. The venue was a large community sports center, 40 minutes outside Clover Ridge. The kind of facility that hosted everything from youth soccer tournaments to regional martial arts competitions to high school graduation ceremonies, built for function rather than atmosphere, every seat visible from every angle. When Marcus arrived 90 minutes before the competition started, the parking lot was already half full. He sat in the truck for exactly 2 minutes. Then he got out. Carter found him just inside the entrance, which meant Carter had been watching for him, which meant Carter knew he was coming, which meant someone had told him, which meant Devin had probably texted Carter the way Devin apparently texted everyone everything because Devin was 20 years old and believed in communication as a value. "He knows you're coming," Carter asked. "No," Marcus said. Carter nodded slowly. "Good. Let him find you." They stood together near the entrance, and Marcus watched the facility fill up. Families, training partners, coaches, officials in their blazers with lanyards. The particular social universe of regional amateur competition, intensely, local, deeply serious about itself, full of grudges and alliances and histories that outsiders couldn't decode. Marcus had operated in many universes as an outsider. He was comfortable at the edges of things. Devin appeared from across the room, spotted them both, and walked over with the energy of someone who had been awake since 4 in the morning, running on purpose and coffee. "He's in the back warming up," Devin said without preamble. "He's focused. He's different today. Not quiet scared different, actually ready different. I've been watching him warm up for 4 months, and today is different." He looked at Marcus. "Whatever happened in those 6 morning sessions, it worked." "He did the work," Marcus said. "I just showed up." Devin opened his mouth, closed it, seemed to decide against whatever he'd been about to say. Then he said it anyway. "Can I ask you something?" "You're going to regardless." "True." Devin looked at him directly. "Carter told me this morning about who you were before." He paused. "He thought I should know. I think because he thought I was close to figuring it out anyway, and knowing would be cleaner than almost knowing." He held Marcus's gaze. "Navy SEAL, 11 years. Marcus looked at Carter. Carter shrugged, once unrepentant. He needed the full picture. Marcus looked back at Devin. "And?" Devin was quiet for a second. "And I want to say something, but I don't want it to come out wrong." "Say it." "The fact that you walked in that gym and let yourself be a beginner," Devin said carefully. "Knowing what you know. Being what you've been. Showing up in worn sneakers and letting Jason talk to you the way he talked to you on day 1. He paused. "That's the most impressive thing I've seen a person do in my life. Not the 4 seconds on the mat. That." He stopped. "That's it. That's all I wanted to say." Marcus looked at the young man for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you, Devon." Devon nodded, stepped back, looked at the floor briefly, then back up. "I'm going to go find a seat." He walked away. Carter and Marcus stood together in the growing crowd. "He's going to be something," Marcus said. "He already is," Carter said. "He just doesn't know the full shape of it yet." He paused. "Like someone else I could name about 4 weeks ago." Marcus let that sit. The competition began at 10 o'clock. Jason's bracket was structured to put him in 4 matches over the course of the day, 2 in the morning semifinal, in the early afternoon final, in the late afternoon. The first match happened before Marcus made it to his seat, and he caught the end of it from the back of the room, standing watching through a gap in the crowd. Jason won in under 2 minutes. But that wasn't what made Marcus stop and watch more carefully. What made him stop was the quality of the win. He'd expected something clean and efficient. What he saw was something more precise than that: a fighter who was operating without the performance layer, without the room management, without the ego display that Marcus had clocked in that first class and in the weeks after. Just the fight. Just the work. Just Jason doing the thing he'd been built to do with the full attention of a man who had found his way back to why he loved it. Carter appeared at Marcus's shoulder. "See it?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "Different," Carter said. "Very." The crowd around them didn't see what they saw. The crowd saw a champion winning efficiently. Marcus and Carter saw a man who had been working in one mode for years and had found a different mode in 6 mornings before sunrise in an empty gym. The second match was harder. Jason's opponent was younger, maybe 22, fast and unpredictable, with the aggressive randomness of someone who hadn't yet learned that aggression without structure was just energy without direction. He pushed Jason hard in the first minute, landed 2 real hits. The crowd reacted to those moments the way crowds react with the sharp intake of breath that means something real just happened. Jason didn't flinch. He reset. He stayed present. He didn't reach for the anger that used to be his default response to being hurt. That particular pride-triggered acceleration that Marcus had identified in those early sessions as his most dangerous habit. He breathed through it. He found his angle. He won. Marcus was sitting by this point in the 3rd row center, Carter beside him. Devon had materialized somewhere in the row behind them because Devon was always where things were happening. He breathed through the reset, Carter said quietly. "Yeah," Marcus said. "We've been working on that for 2 years, Carter said. He never held it before. It always accelerated him. He held it today, Marcus said. Because someone showed him the geometry, Carter said. And he didn't look at Marcus when he said it, just looked at the mat, but the words were specific and intended, and Marcus received them as such. The break between the second match and the semifinal was 40 minutes. Marcus stayed in his seat. He didn't go to the back, didn't seek Jason out, didn't want to insert himself into Jason's preparation space in a way that shifted the weight. Jason knew he was here or he didn't, and either way, what happened on the mat belonged to Jason. But at the 32-minute mark, Jason came through the side door from the warm-up area and walked directly to where Marcus was sitting. He stopped at the row, looked at Marcus. "You came," he said. "I came," Marcus said. "A beat." "Why?" "Because things that are finishing," Marcus said, "deserve witnesses." Jason looked at him for a moment. His expression was the full, open, unguarded expression of a man who had stopped performing and started living, and it was remarkable to see on the face of someone who had spent 6 years perfecting the performance. "I've been thinking about what you told me," Jason said. "About walking away from it, about Amara, about choosing ordinary because she needed you present." "Okay," Marcus said. "I don't think that was settling," Jason said. "I think that was the hardest mission you ever ran." Marcus looked at him. "Staying," Jason said. "Showing up. Being the kind of man your daughter could count on every single day when you had been built for something entirely different. Rewiring everything." He paused. "That's harder than anything I've ever done." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Some days," he said, "yes." "All days," Jason said firmly. "Give yourself that." He held Marcus's gaze for one more second. Then he turned and walked back toward the warm-up area. Devon leaned forward from the row behind. He said the thing to you, Devon observed, that you've been saying to everyone else. Shut up, Devon, Marcus said without edge. Yes, sir, Devon said. The semifinal was the first real test. Jason's opponent was a man named Garrett Sims, 31 years old, former regional champion himself 3 years running before Jason had started his own streak, built with the thick durability of someone who had been doing this for 15 years and had learned that the best use of your body in a fight was to make yourself so difficult to move that your opponent ran out of ideas. He was not elegant. He was not fast. He was immovable in the way that certain problems are immovable, not because they're complicated, but because they're simply dense, and you have to find the specific angle that makes density irrelevant. Marcus sat forward. He saw Jason see it, saw the moment Jason read Sims, and understood what kind of problem he was solving. Watched Jason's approach change before the first exchange, watched him switch from his natural preference for speed to something more patient and structural, watched him look for the geometry. The first 90 seconds were inconclusive, both fighters establishing reading cataloging. Then Sims pressed. He came in heavy, using his mass, the way he'd learned to use it not as a charge, but as a tide, steady and overwhelming. The kind of pressure that doesn't give you a moment to reset. Jason absorbed it and moved with it, and for about 4 seconds, the crowd thought Sims had him. Marcus heard the shift in the room's breathing, saw a few people stand up. But Jason didn't reach for the accelerator. He stayed present. He found the angle. And in one fluid movement that was completely without wasted energy, he redirected Sims's mass the way water redirects stone, not by opposing it, but by showing it where it was already going and then getting out of the way. Sims went down. Not dramatically, not spectacularly, clean. The crowd erupted. Carter exhaled beside Marcus, one long, slow, controlled exhale that contained about 3 years of investment in a 26-year-old. Marcus sat back in his seat. Devon behind him said something that sounded like a prayer. Jason won the semifinal. I didn't celebrate. He helped Sims up, his hand extended. Sims taking it the small, sincere nod of respect that fighters exchange when they've been real with each other, and he walked off the mat with his head down and his mind already somewhere else. That's when Beaumont appeared. Marcus saw him before Carter did. He was moving through the crowd along the far wall, his 2 companions from Thursday night flanking him, and he was headed toward the corridor that led to the warm-up area where Jason would be between the semifinal and the final. Moving with the specific directional purpose of a man who had decided that now was the time to apply pressure. Marcus stood up. Carter saw it, saw Beaumont, looked at Marcus. Don't, Carter said. Low fast. He's going to Jason before the final, Marcus said. I know, let me, Carter. Marcus looked at him directly. You handle the officials. Find whoever's running the sanctioning body investigation and put them in position to see this conversation happen. Get them close enough to observe. He paused. I'll handle Beaumont. Carter stared at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then he stood up and moved in the opposite direction toward the officials' table with the quiet, decisive movement of a man who has been given a clear assignment and knows how to execute it. Devon was standing now too. Devon, Marcus said. I'm not staying in my seat, Devon said preemptively. No, I need you to find Jason and keep him in the warm-up area for 10 minutes. Tell him I said not to come out until I come get him. Devon blinked. He's going to ask why. Tell him I said trust the geometry. Devon opened his mouth, closed it, nodded once sharply and moved. Marcus walked toward Beaumont. He moved through the crowd the way he'd learned to move through crowds a long time ago. Not fast, not aggressive, not in a way that announced itself. Just direct. A straight line from where he was to where he needed to be, using the natural flow of people around him, arriving at the corridor entrance precisely as Beaumont was about to step into it. Beaumont stopped. He looked at Marcus. Recognition moved through his face, not of who Marcus was specifically, but of the category. The recognition that precedes understanding when your body registers something before your brain has finished processing it. This corridor is for competitors, Marcus said. He said it without heat, flatly like stating a fact. Beaumont looked at him. "I'm here to see Jason Whitmore." "He's preparing for his final," Marcus said. "He'll see you after." "I'll decide when I see my—" "He'll see you after," Marcus said again. Same tone, same register. The complete absence of aggression in his voice was its own kind of wall. There was nothing to push against, no emotion to escalate, no ego to engage. Just a fact being stated by a man who had stated facts in circumstances that made this look like a minor Tuesday. One of Beaumont's companions took a step forward. Marcus looked at him. The man stopped, not because Marcus did anything. Because of the specific quality of stillness that Marcus carried, the kind that communicates without communication. That this is not a situation that benefits from escalation. It was the stillness of a man who had made complex calculations in much shorter time than this, and arrived at outcomes that he then had to live with, and who had learned that stillness was not the absence of capability, but the management of it. Beaumont understood something. Marcus could see him understanding it, the slight shift in his eyes, the recalculation. "Who are you?" Beaumont said. His voice was different. The pleasantness was still there, but thinner. "I'm a maintenance technician," Marcus said, "from Clover Ridge." Beaumont looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked past Marcus at the corridor. "Tell Jason," he said carefully, "that we have things to discuss." "He knows," Marcus said. "He'll find you." And then from behind, Beaumont and slightly to the right, a woman in a lanyard stepped forward, mid-40s blazer, the specific posture of a regional official who had been watching this exchange from 3 feet away and had heard everything she needed to hear. "Mr. Beaumont," she said, "my name is Sandra Reeves. I'm with the Regional Sanctioning Committee. We've been looking for you." The pleasantness left Beaumont's face entirely. Carter had done his job. Marcus stepped aside. I didn't watch what happened after that. He turned and walked down the corridor to the warm-up area and found Devon standing outside the door with his arms crossed and the expression of a young man who had successfully completed an assignment and was very interested in what happened next. "He's inside," Devon said. "He asked what was happening. I said trust the geometry. He said that's not an explanation. I said that's what Marcus said. He said fine." Marcus opened the door. Jason was inside on his feet, the pre-final energy on him like static electricity. He turned when Marcus came in. "What happened?" he said immediately. "Beaumont came to find you before the final," Marcus said. "He won't. The sanctioning committee has him now." Jason stared at him. "What did you—" Carter positioned the investigator. "I just occupied the corridor for 90 seconds. He paused. "It wasn't complicated. It was—" Jason stopped, started again. "You did that for me." "I did that because it needed doing," Marcus said. "Same reason you fix a cabinet hinge." Jason laughed, sudden and genuine, and the laugh broke the tension in the room like a window cracking open. "How long do I have?" Jason asked. 23 minutes to the final." Jason nodded, rolled his shoulders. The laugh was already gone, replaced by the focused readiness of a man who had found his center and knew how to return to it. "How do I look?" he asked. "Like someone who remembers why they love it," Marcus said. Jason held his gaze. "Because I do," he said simply. "Then go win your championship," Marcus said. "And then we'll figure out the rest." The rest being Beaumont and the money and all of it. "One thing at a time," Marcus said. "The mat first. Everything else is after the mat." Jason nodded. He breathed once deep and deliberate, the kind of breath that settles things. "Okay," he said. "Okay." He looked at Marcus. "You'll be out there." "Third row center," Marcus said. "Same seat." Jason looked at him for one more moment. Then he extended his hand. Not for a handshake. Just extended it open the way you extend a hand to someone you trust. Marcus gripped it once. Firm, brief. The handshake of men who have been through something and know they've been through something and don't need more words than that. Devon from the doorway said softly, "That's a movie right there." "Devon," both Marcus and Jason said simultaneously. "Going," Devon said, and disappeared. The final was against a fighter named Keene, 28, from a city 2 hours north, 3 years of regional competition behind him, and a style that was the opposite of Sim's fast, technical creative, the kind of opponent who won with combinations that nobody expected because nobody expected the specific imagination he brought to them. He was the most interesting fighter Marcus had watched all day, and he watched him with the full attention of someone who needed to understand what Jason was about to face. The match began. The first 45 seconds were mutual respect expressed through caution. Two experienced fighters, feeling each other out, cataloging, building a picture. The crowd was quieter than it had been all day. The quality of the match was evident even to the non-practitioners in the room, the way the quality of something real is always evident. Keane moved first with a real combination. 4-part. The fourth element disguised by the third. Exactly the kind of thing Marcus had identified as his signature from watching the earlier matches. Jason read the third element correctly and adjusted. The fourth element caught him anyway slightly, but he'd mitigated enough that it was an impression rather than a real hit, and he moved through it without the pride-triggered acceleration, without the anger, with the specific equanimity of a man who understood that being hit was information and not insult. He found his angle. He executed. Keane went to the mat for the first time. The crowd came alive. What followed was the best 7 minutes of competitive martial arts Marcus had seen in his life, and he held himself very still, watching it, his hands loose on his knees, his breath steady, completely present in the way he'd been learning to be present again, fully there, fully witnessing, not managing the experience, but actually inside it. Jason was extraordinary, not in the way. He had been extraordinary before. Not the champion performing championship. Not the fighter proving superiority. Something different. He fought with the full expression of 15 years of skill, stripped of everything that had been layered on top of it, moving with the fluid precision of someone who had found what was buried and brought it back to the surface, and was now using it without apology or performance, or anything other than the genuine whole love of the work itself. Keane took him down in the 4th minute. A genuinely remarkable move, creative and fast and deserved. The crowd gasped. Jason hit the mat. He lay there for exactly 1 second. Then he was back up, not angry, not accelerating from pride, just up, present, back in it. The man who had been practicing the space between stimulus and response for 6 mornings in an empty gym had arrived at this moment and was using everything he'd found there. He won, not dramatically, not in a sudden spectacular finish. He won the way water wins, persistently finding every available angle, wearing down resistance with the patient consistency of something that has decided where it's going and will not be redirected. The points accumulated. Keane fought brilliantly, and it wasn't enough. The final score was not close. When it was over, when the official raised Jason's hand, and the room erupted with the specific noise of a crowd releasing something they'd been holding, Marcus sat very still for a moment. He thought about Darius. Man, you should see this. You should be here. The absence as always, the specific shape of it. But tonight, and this was new, this was different from 3 years of this same moment alongside the absence, something else. Something that felt like he would be so glad this happened. Not grief without context. Grief with gratitude inside it. Carter put his hand on Marcus's shoulder once. Brief. He didn't say anything. That was enough. Devon was already on his feet making a noise that was not quite a word but communicated everything. Jason on the mat looked immediately toward the 3rd row. Found Marcus. Held his gaze across the full length of the room, across the erupting crowd, across all the distance between where a man starts and where he arrives. And nodded once. Marcus nodded back. 2 hours later, the 4 of them sat in a diner 6 blocks from the venue. Marcus, Jason, Carter, Devon in a corner booth coffee, going cold because nobody was paying attention to the coffee. They were paying attention to the conversation. The Beaumont situation. Sandra Reeves and the sanctioning committee had detained him long enough to make the conversation formal. His 2 companions had been separately interviewed. The financial entanglement between Beaumont and Jason was already being reviewed, and the committee's initial read. Carter had talked to Reeves directly after the final, was that Jason's cooperation with the investigation would be viewed as evidence of good faith, and that the entanglement itself, while problematic, was being treated as coercion rather than collusion, given the documented circumstances of how it began. "It's not over," Carter said. "There's a process. It'll take months." "I know," Jason said. "I'll cooperate with everything." He paused. "I should have done this 2 years ago." "You weren't ready 2 years ago," Carter said. "No," Jason agreed. He looked at his coffee. "I was too busy being the best person in every room." He said it without bitterness, with the clean honesty of a man who had done his accounting and accepted the number. Devin said, "What happens to the gym?" "The gym is fine," Jason said. "The gym was never Beaumont's. He had claim on my results, not my asset." He paused. "I'll need to restructure some things, but the gym is fine." "Good," Devin said, "because some of us have made plans." Jason looked at him. "Plans." "Long-term plans," Devin said seriously, "involving continued access to this level of instruction." He glanced at Marcus. "Both levels." Marcus looked at the young man. "I'm not an instructor." "With respect," Devin said, "you literally are." "I'm a student who has some background that happens to be useful in specific—" "Marcus," Jason said. Marcus stopped. Jason looked at him across the table. "You walked into my gym for a beginner class. You stayed. You showed up at 6 in the morning for 6 days and helped me find something I'd lost." He paused. "You stood in a corridor and kept Beaumont away from me when I needed to be left alone to do my work." Another pause. "You told me the truth about who you were because you thought I needed it." He looked at Marcus steadily. "That's not a student with a useful background. That's a teacher who hasn't accepted his job yet." The diner was quiet around them. Marcus looked at his coffee. He thought about what it had felt like to show Jason the geometry. To feel Jason's movement change the moment understanding replaced calculation. To see Devin's defensive gap close up and his whole posture shift when the principle clicked. He thought about 6 mornings before sunrise in an empty gym, the best 6 mornings he'd had in 4 years. I thought about Amara saying you always figure it out, and Renee saying be all of you, and Carter saying past assistance is not authorization. No, that wasn't Carter. That was he was mixing things up. He was tired. It had been a long day. He thought about Darius. "You've been in it since Tuesday, man. Stop pretending you're just passing through." He looked up. "2 mornings a week," he said. "Before the regular class. I'm not on the schedule. I'm not on any paperwork. I'm not—" "2 mornings a week," Jason said immediately. "And I'm still a student in the regular class." "You're still a student in the regular class. And if Amara needs me for anything?" "Then you're there for Amara," Jason said. "That's not even a question. That's not negotiable in any direction." He paused. "She comes first. She has always come first. That's not a compromise, that's a condition." Marcus looked at him. "Carter told me what you said," Jason said quietly. "About why you left. About her needing you present." He held Marcus's gaze. "The gym will work around your daughter, full stop, every time without exception." The thing in Marcus's chest. The weight that had been living there since 3 years ago, since before that, since the specific morning he'd carried Amara out of the hospital and sat in his car and understood that everything had reorganized itself, shifted again. Lighter, not gone. I was realistic enough to know it wouldn't be gone, but lighter, manageable. "Okay," Marcus said. Devin pumped his fist once briefly, then composed himself with visible effort. Carter picked up his coffee, looked at Marcus over the rim. Something in his eyes that was not quite a smile, but was warmer than anything the man's face usually did. "Welcome back," Carter said. Marcus looked at him. "To what?" "To being the whole man," Carter said simply. Marcus sat with that for a moment. Then he picked up his own coffee. It was cold. He drank it anyway. Outside the diner at 8:47 on a Saturday night, he called Renee. She picked up on the first ring this time. Tell me, she said. "He won," Marcus said. "Jason won the championship." "And you?" He stood on the sidewalk outside a diner in a city 40 minutes from Clover Ridge, with a championship behind him that wasn't his, and a weight that was lighter than it had been in years, and a Tuesday and Thursday morning commitment that he'd made at a table over cold coffee, and the particular feeling of a man who has been trying to be ordinary for 4 years, and has finally honestly admitted that ordinary was never the right goal. Presence was the goal. Full presence. All of him. In the room. For Amara. For the work. For the people who, for reasons that had nothing to do with his plan, had walked into his life through a gym door in Clover Ridge, Georgia, and refused to let him be invisible. "I think," he said, "I figured something out." Renee said nothing for a moment. He could hear her breathing. Could picture her exactly, Atlanta apartment, Saturday night phone pressed against her ear with both hands, the way she held it when she was paying full attention. "Yeah," she said softly. "I can hear it." He drove home. He pulled into the driveway. The porch light was on. He sat in the truck for a moment, not the avoidant sit, not the bracing sit, not the staring at the ceiling that hadn't happened, yet sit. Just a moment of being still inside a completed day. He went inside. Amara was asleep on the couch. Renee had brought her back before he returned, tucked her in under the living room blanket with the cartoon bears, left a note on the kitchen counter that said she wouldn't sleep in her bed, said she wanted to be awake when you got home. She was asleep by 7:30. "You're welcome. Love you." Followed by a drawing of what appeared to be a stick figure winning a trophy, which was Renee's own particular kind of humor. He stood over his daughter for a long moment. 8 years old. Elephant under one arm. Orange nightlight visible through her cracked bedroom door even though she was out here on the couch. Peaceful, completely unaware face of a child who trusted the world to hold while she slept because her father was in it. He crouched down beside her. She didn't wake up, but she reached out the way sleeping children sometimes do, her small hand finding his arm and gripping it once briefly, and then releasing. He stayed crouched for another minute. Then he stood. He went to the kitchen and cleaned up the breakfast dishes he'd left that morning, the slightly burned eggs, the plates, the 2 forks, the glasses with their dried orange juice rings. He washed them by hand, slowly, methodically. The ordinary work of an ordinary kitchen on an ordinary Saturday night. But he was not ordinary. He had never been ordinary. And standing at the kitchen sink in Clover Ridge, Georgia, at 9:15 at night, washing dishes while his daughter slept on the couch, and his sister drove back to Atlanta, and a 26-year-old champion sat somewhere with a trophy he'd won clean and a future he'd chosen free. Marcus Reed finally fully, completely accepted that. Not with a speech. Not with ceremony. Not with anything except the clean, specific, permanent feeling of a man who has stopped lying to himself about the shape of who he is. He dried his hands on the dish towel. He went to the living room. He sat on the floor beside the couch where Amara was sleeping, his back against the cushion, her small breathing above him. He sat there for a while in the quiet of his home, in the life he'd